Fusion Mobile, quality e-learning experience on the go.
You're welcome to another session of biology powered by Fusion Mobile e-learning platform. I remain my humble self. I'm Oshito Gwolajide, aka Smoking Brain, and we would be looking at cell today under biology. These are the outlines. We'll be looking at what is cell, cell history and its theory. We'll be looking at the forms in which living cells exist. We'll be looking at cell organelles and their functions. And lastly, we're going to be looking at the differences between plant and animal cell. So the first question for today is, what is cell? Many of us have been hearing the word cell. We have battery cell, we have animal cell, we have different type of cell. But in biology, we're talking about cell with regards to life. Cell is the basic structural and functional unit of life. Cell is the basic structural and functional unit of life. Now, the foundation of every structure is the cell. The foundation of every function carried out by any part of the body is the cell. Cell itself is life. And so we say cell is what? A unit of life. Again, cell is the basic structural and functional unit of life. It is the simplest form of life. Now, organisms with cell are basically divided into two. Organisms that possess cell, they are basically divided into two. We have the unicellular organisms, also known as acellular organisms, and we have the multicellular organisms. Now, what is the basic difference between unicellular organism and multicellular organism? The word unicellular has uni. The word multicellular has multi. Uni simply means one, single. While multi means what? More than one. More than one. Or simply say groups. Now, unicellular organisms are organisms with only one single cell. Again, unicellular organisms are organisms with only one single cell. And so we say what? Unicellular organisms or what? Acellular organisms. A very good example of a unicellular organism is what we call the amoeba. Amoeba, Euglena, Chlamydomonas. Amoeba, Euglena, and Chlamydomonas are what? Unicellular organisms. A very good example of the multicellular organism is what we call human. Humans are multicellular organisms. Plants are multicellular organisms. And when we're talking about plants, we talk about plants like Spirogyra. They are all what? Multicellular organisms. Another basic difference between unicellular and multicellular organism is that in unicellular organism, one cell is performing several functions. The function of locomotion, the function of sensitivity, the function of growth, the function of reproduction are all performed by only one single cell. But in multicellular organism, there is room for specialization. There is a cell that is performing the function of movement. There is another that is performing the function of reproduction. And there is also another that is performing the function of respiration. And so we've seen now that for multicellular organism, there is room for specialization. But for unicellular organism, there is no room for specialization. One cell carries out several functions. Different cells carry out different functions for multicellular organisms. Example of unicellular organism again are amoeba, Euglena, Chlamydomonas. Example of multicellular organisms are humans, you and I, plants such as mango tree, different trees, so to speak, and Spirogyra. Now, having established the fact that the cell is the basic structural and functional unit of life, or simply say the simplest form of life, we will now move on to the second outline, which is cell theory and history. Are you with me? We will go to the second outline, which is cell theory and history. Okay, so far we've been able to establish the definition of cell. We said a cell is the basic structural and functional unit of life. I also said it is the simplest form of life. There is no life without cell. There is no life apart from cell. For every cell, there is life. Now, you and I know, based on what we've talked so far, that a cell is basically divided into two, based on the organisms. One unicellular organisms and one multicellular organisms. So I said unicellular organisms are organisms with only one single cell. One multicellular organisms are organisms with a group of cells, more than one cell. So I said in unicellular organisms, the cell perform all functions. The function of locomotion, which is known as movement, reproduction, respiration, sensitivity. But when it comes to multicellular organisms, they have different number of cells, and these different cells have a specific function. There's a particular cell for movement, there's one for excretion, there's one for locomotion. Are you with me? So multicellular organisms are the group of cells present in them gives room for what? Specialization. And so now we're going to be looking at the history of the cell as well as the cell theory. So right now on the board are notable men. Wow. Wonderful men that actually worked on what? Cell. It was due to their contribution that we now have today what we call cell theory. So the first on my list is Robert Hooke. Robert Hooke. Robert Hooke. Robert Hooke. So basically Robert Hooke happens to be a bacteriologist. Are you with me? Robert Hooke happens to be a bacteriologist. He is generally known as the father of cells. He himself was the first person that discovered cell. He was the first person that talked about cell. And so an honor was given to him as the father of cell. There is no way you talk about cell without talking about Robert Hooke. Now Robert Hooke in 1665 discovered the cell. He discovered the honeycomb structure of a cell. He worked on he sliced the bark of an oak tree. An oak tree. He sliced the bark and he studied it. He now discovered that there is a compartment in it. There is a room in it. So he called those rooms cell. Are you with me? So he was the first person that worked on cell. He discovered cell. He wrote on cell in 1665. So if you ask the question, in what year was cell discovered? It was in 1665. Who was the person that discovered cell? The person's name is Robert Hooke. He's also known as the father of cell. So number 2 on my list is Félix Dujardin. Félix Dujardin. Félix Dujardin is also a scientist, a biologist, so to speak. He was one that discovered the living component of the cell. The living component of the cell. The part of the cell that has life. What makes a cell a cell? It was one that discovered the living part of the cell. And the living part of the cell, he called it what? Protoplasm. So class, the living part of a cell or the living component of the cell is called the protoplasm. Again, the living component of the cell is called the protoplasm. And it was discovered or described by this man, Félix Dujardin, in 1835. Again, in 1835, Félix Dujardin discovered the living component of the cell. This he called protoplasm. Now number 3 on our list is Matthias Kleiden. Matthias Kleiden. Now this man happens to be a German botanist. Class, who is a botanist? A botanist is a person that studies plants. He studied plant science, the marketing of plants, the reproduction of plants, the anatomy of plants, the physiology of plants. He studied everything about plants. So he is a German botanist by profession. He was one that discovered cell in plants. He discovered cell in plants in 1838. Again, Matthias Kleiden, a German botanist, discovered cell in plants in 1838. Can we just take it from the beginning? Robert Hooke is the founding father of cell. He is known as the father of cell. He discovered cell in 1665. He described the honeycomb structure of the cell. He got a slice of an oak tree, the bark, and he discovered that it has compartments after he studied it. And those compartments, he called them rooms. The rooms, he gave name to them, and the rooms are actually called cell. Félix Dujardin in 1835 discovered the living component of the cell. This he called protoplasm. Matthias Kleiden, a German botanist, one whose profession is to collect plants. He studied plants extensively, thoroughly, so to speak. Matthias Kleiden in 1838 discovered plants. In 1839, a year after, Theodor Schwann, a German zoologist, he studied animals. Zoologist was his profession. Are you with me? He is a zoologist. A German zoologist, Theodor Schwann, in 1839, discovered cell in animals. with the contributive effort of both Matthias Kleiding and Theodor Schwein in 1839, therefore, the cell theory was published. Are you with me? With the contributive effort of Matthias Kleiding, Theodor Schwein, the cell theory was published in 1839. Note, in 1838, Matthias Kleiding discovered cell implant. In 1839, Theodor Schwein discovered cell in animals. With their joint effort, their complementary effort, their contributive effort, the cell theory was published in 1839. Then something happened in 1855. This particular man, Rudolf von Virchow. Okay? Rudolf von Virchow. Rudolf von Virchow in 1855 said all cells come from previously existing cells. For we to have a new cell today, it means this cell emerged from a cell that has been before. All cell comes from previously existing cells. There is no new cell, so to speak. It was actually a cell that has been modified from a previously existing cell. All cells come from previously existing cell. It was this man that made that statement. Are you with me? So can I just take it for the last time? Robert Hooke in 1665 discovered cell. He is known as the father of cell. Felix Dujardin in 1835 discovered protoplasm, which is the living component of the cell. Matthias Kleiding in 1838 discovered cell in plants. Theodor Schwein in 1839 discovered cell in animals. With their contributive effort, the cell theory was published in 1839. Rudolf von Virchow in 1855 said all cells come from previously existing cells. Now let's quickly take a look at the cell theory. The cell theory. The cell theory. Now we've got 5 basic facts under the cell theory. 5 basic facts that have been found to be repeatedly correct. Take note. Without an observation, without an hypothesis, without an experiment, there can never be a theory. A theory is something that has been repeatedly correct, a fact that has been found to be true at all times. Now, what are these facts? Can we just take a look at it? Number 1, the cell is the structural and functional unit of life. Number 2, all living organisms are made up of cells, including you. All living organisms are made up of cells. Number 1, I take it from the beginning. The cell is the structural and functional unit of life. Number 2, all living cells are made up of cells. All living organisms, rather, are made up of cells. And number 3, cells come from previously existing cells. All cells come from previously existing cells. Number 4, there is no life apart from the life of cell. I love this. There is no life apart from the cell. In other words, no cell, no life. There is no life apart from the cell. I tell you from the beginning, cell is the structural and functional unit of life. And number two, you need to know this. Number 1, I said cell is the structural and functional unit of life. And number 2, all organisms are made up of cells. And number 3, all cells come from previously existing cells. Number 4, there is no life apart from the life of cell. So now let's look at the next one. Cells are either unicellular or multicellular. As I said earlier, unicellular cells are unicellular organisms are organisms with only one single cell. While multicellular organisms are organisms with what? Diverse type of cells. And so these are the cell theory. The structural and functional unit of life, that's 1. Number 2, all living organisms are made up of cells. And number 3, all cells come from previously existing cells. Number 4, there is no life apart from cell. While number 5, cells are either unicellular or multicellular. Now, as usual, a question will pop up on your screen. Try as much as possible to attempt them. Okay, so far we've been able to establish the definition of cell. We said cell is the basic structural and functional unit of life. And from there, we looked at some notable scientists that worked on cell. We said Robert Hooke is the founding father of cell. And so he's known as the father of cell. He discovered cell in 1665. And we did not stop there. We also look at the contribution of Felix Dujardin, the man that described the living component of the cell. And he called it what? Protoplasm. And we also went further. We look at Matthias Kleiding, a German botanist, so to speak. He discovered cell in plants. Then we look at Theodor Schwein, the man that discovered cell in animals. We said their contributive effort led to the development of the cell theory in 1839. Then lastly, we look at Rudolf von Virchow, the man that said all cells come from previously existing cells. Then we talked extensively on the cell theory, where I said the cell is the basic structure and functional unit of life. All cells come from previously existing cell. There is no life apart from the life of a cell. In other words, no cell, no life. Are you me? Then we said cells are based on organisms who have what? Unicellular cells and what? Multicellular cells. So now we're going to be looking at the forms in which living cells exist. So we have 4 basic forms in which living cells exist. That means if the cell does not exist as free living, it will exist as a colony. If it doesn't exist as a colony, it will exist as a filament. If it doesn't exist as a filament, it must then exist as part of a living organism. So we're going to be looking at these one after the other. So the existence of cells as free living organisms. Free living simply means what? The ability to be independent. Now, organisms that are independent in nature are known as unicellular organisms. They are free living organisms. Despite the fact that they have one cell, that cell is performing all functions. The function of movement, the function of sensitivity, the function of reproduction, respiration, excretion, and all that. So unicellular organisms are performing what? All life processes with just one cell. So cells are free as free living organisms. Talks about unicellular organisms having just one cell, and that cell is performing all functions. So what are examples of organisms that falls into this category? Examples of organisms that are free living. Number 1 is what? Our amoeba. Number 2, aside from amoeba, we have Euglena. Euglena viridis. Aside from Euglena viridis, we have Paramecium. We have Paramecium. Aside from Paramecium, we have Chlamydomonas. etc. Now let's look at this extensively. Amoeba. Now amoeba is generally known by all as a shapeless organism. Amoeba has irregular shape, so to speak. Most people call the shape amoeboid. It is also safe to say that. Amoeba, take note for today that amoeba has an irregular shape or an amoeboid shape. Amoeba move with the aid of the pseudopodia. Pseudopodia. With the aid of a pseudopodia, amoeba is able to move. Now let's quickly look at pseudopodia and let's try to break it down. Now the word pseudo means false. The word podia means feet. So amoeba has what? False feet. It is not a true feet. Now it is with this false feet that it gets to move and do other life processes. Amoeba also have contractile vacuole, which it uses for what? For excretion. Are you with me? So amoeba move with the aid of what? The pseudopodia. Now we have the Euglena viridis. Euglena viridis move with the aid of the flagella. It moves with the aid of what? The flagella. Euglena viridis. We have the Paramecium. Paramecium has a slipper shape. It moves with the aid of the cilia. It belongs to the class Ciliata. Ciliata. Amoeba belongs to the class Sarcodina. Sarcodina. Are you with me? Sarcodina and Ciliata. And lastly, we have what we call the Chlamydomonas. Chlamydomonas also move with the aid of what? The flagella. So these are the basic organisms that live freely in nature. They are independent. They don't depend on anyone. They have one cell performing all functions. Again, let's look at this. We have amoeba, which moves with the aid of the pseudopodia. We have Euglena, it moves with the aid of the flagella. We have Paramecium having slipper shape, it moves with the aid of the cilia. We have Chlamydomonas, it moves with the aid of what? The flagella. So now we're going to move on to the next one, which is cell as a colony. Cell as a colony. Cells that exist as a colony cannot be easily differentiated. They are usually knitted to each other or knitted to one another, so to speak. So it is very, very hard for you to differentiate them. They are in clusters. They are grouped together. They do stuff together. Everything they do it together. So they are closely knitted together, so to speak. So cells that exist as a colony, a very good example of them is the volvox. Another is the Pandorina. Another is the Eudorina. So we have the volvox, we have the Pandorina, and we have the Eudorina. Now Eudorina has more cells than Pandorina. It has more clusters than Pandorina. We have the volvox. So these are examples of cells that falls under this group as a colony. they are together, their membranes are tightly held together. So they do stuff together, they share stuff together. So a very good example of them is the volvus, the pandorina, and the eudorina. So quickly we'll move to cell as a filament. Now for cells as a filament, the cells are actually placed end to end. We have a particular cell here, it will place end to end to another particular cell, end to end to another particular cell. So we say they are existing as what? A filament. A very good example of cells as a filament is the spirogyra. Aside from spirogyra, we have the zygnema. So this falls under this category as a filament. We have spirogyra and we have what we call zygnema. So lastly, we have cells as part of a living organism. Cells as part of a living organism. So basically, I'll be explaining some terms to you. Now, cell is the basic structural and functional unit of life. Cell combination of two or more cells performing similar function is called what? Organ. Combination of two or more organs performing similar function is called... Okay, sorry, I need to establish something. A cell is the basic structural and functional unit of life. Combination of two or more cells performing similar function is called the tissue. Combination of two or more tissue performing similar function is called the organ. Combination of two or more organs performing similar function is called the system. Now the system now makes up the what? The organism. Are you with me? So whenever we talk about cell as part of a living organism, we talk about the cells in humans. Like, do you know that we have cells in our eyes? We have the cone cells and the row cells. We have sex cells, the sperm. For females, we have their egg cells, so to speak. In plants, they have the ovules, they have the pollen grains as well. So cell as part of a living organism, the cell is structural functional unit of life. Combination of two or more cells performing similar function is called tissue. Combination of two or more tissues performing similar function is called organ. Combination of two or more organs performing similar function is called system. The combination of two or more systems in the body will lead to what we call organism. Like in our body, we have excretory system, we have circulatory system, we have respiratory system, we have endocrine system, we have nervous system, we have skeletal system, among others. So having a look at this now, we'll now move on to cell organelles and their functions. Cell organelles and their function. So we're going to be looking at the basic cell organelles, ranging from the nucleus to the chloroplast, depending on whether it is plant or an animal. We have the vacuoles, we have the contractile vacuoles, we have the lysosomes, we have the Golgi bodies, we have the endoplasmic reticulum. So we're going to be looking at everything, so to speak. We're going to be looking at them in total. Are you with me? Yeah. Okay, so right about now, we're going to be looking at organelles that are found in plant and animal. Like, we merge them together and their functions. Are you with me? So number one on our list is the nucleus. Now, what is the function of the nucleus? The function of the nucleus is to control every activities of the cell. The function of the nucleus is to control every activities of the cell. So the nucleus control every activities of the cell. It controls every activities of the cell. It is just in fact, the nucleus is the life of the cell. Now we have the chromosome. The chromosome contains genetic material. The chromosomes contain what? Genetic material. And what are the genetic material? They contain DNA. The chromosome is the reason why you look like your daddy and your mommy and not your landlord. So basically, the chromosome contains genetic materials, which is known as what? The DNA. So now the next on our list is the mitochondria. Mitochondria is known as the powerhouse. The powerhouse of plant and animal. Now what do I mean by powerhouse? What I actually meant is that it is at that point that food is being produced. Energy is released. Are you with me? Now when you take in food such as beans, gari, bread or whatever, well, after you finish eating the food, oxygen will act on that food and the mitochondria will now get to work. The mitochondria will churn down the food, then energy will be released. Now we have the vacuole. Now the vacuole are responsible for osmoregulation. They are responsible for osmoregulation. I mean, if you have excessive water in the body, they take it away. They help to maintain balance in the body. We have the endoplasmic reticulum. They help to transport materials in the cytoplasm. They help to transport materials in the cytoplasm. They help to transport materials in the cytoplasm. We have the Golgi bodies. They are responsible for synthesis, packaging, and distribution of materials. They are responsible for synthesis, packaging, and distribution of material in the cell. We have the chloroplast. The chloroplast is present only in plants. It contains chlorophyll. It is needed for photosynthesis. It aids photosynthesis. Without the chloroplast, there is no photosynthesis. We have the lysosomes. The lysosome is the site for respiratory enzymes. They produce respiratory enzymes. Site for respiratory enzymes. Now we have the ribosomes. The ribosomes are responsible for protein synthesis. They are responsible for protein synthesis. While lastly we have the centrioles. The centrioles are responsible for cell division. And now lest I forget, we also have the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm. Now the cytoplasm is the liquid portion of the cell. The liquid portion of the cell. Every organelles, mitochondria, vacuole, endoplasmic reticulum, every one of them, they lie in the cytoplasm. Now basically, whenever you hear the word cell, cell is cytoplasm plus protoplasm. Cell is cytoplasm plus protoplasm. Protoplasm is the living component of the cell, while cytoplasm is non-living. It is like basically it is the surrounding of the cell, the liquid portion of the cell, where every organelle resides. So let's just take it again. I said the nucleus controls every activities of the cell. We have the chromosome, which contains genetic material in the cell. We have mitochondria. It is a powerhouse of plant and animal. That is where respiration takes place and energy is released. We have the vacuole. The vacuole is responsible for osmoregulation. That is excess water, taking it out of the body. We have the endoplasmic reticulum, responsible for transporting materials in the cytoplasm. We have Golgi bodies. They function for synthesis, packaging, and distribution of material in the cell. We have chloroplast, which is found in plant. It is responsible for photosynthesis. Okay, we've got lysosomes, and lysosomes are sites for respiratory enzymes. We have ribosomes, they are there for protein synthesis. We have centrioles, they help in cell division, and we have cytoplasm, which is the liquid portion of the cell or the surrounding of the cell. So I said that the cell is what? Cytoplasm plus protoplasm. Again, protoplasm is the liquid, protoplasm is the living component of the cell. So don't forget. So now we're going to be going through our last outline, and that is what? Differences between plant and animal cell. So that's what we're going to be looking at now. The differences between plant and animal cell. So stay tuned and don't go away. So quickly we'll be looking at the differences between plant cell and animal cell. Everyone has seen the plant before, and everyone has seen an animal before. So this should not be strange to you. Now, whenever we're talking about cell, we're talking about something that is in them. It is not something that is visible. Are you with me? As a matter of fact, a cell cannot be seen with the naked eye. It can be seen with the aid of a microscope. And the best of all microscope is the electron microscope, because it has magnifying power. It can enlarge tiny compartment. So now we're going to be looking at the differences between plant cell and animal cell. Now plant cell has chloroplast, animal cell does not have chloroplast. By implication, plant cell undergo photosynthesis, while animal cell does not undergo photosynthesis. Still on it, plant cell can manufacture their food by themselves, while animal cell depends directly or indirectly on plants for food. Now what are the shapes of plant cell and animal cell? The shape of plant cell is what? Definite. It has definite shape. Are you with me? It has a fist shape. While animal cell has no definite shape. It has no definite shape. Now let's look at the cell wall. The cell wall of plant is rigid. The cell wall of plant is rigid. Again, the cell wall of plant is rigid. Animal cell has no cell wall. Animal has no cell wall. Now let's look at the cell membrane. Plant cell has no flexible. Plant cell have no flexible cell membrane. Animal has flexible cell membrane. It has flexible cell membrane. Now let's take a look at it again from the beginning. Plant cell has chloroplast. Animal cell does not have. Plant cell has a definite shape. Animal cell does not have a definite shape. The cell wall of plants is rigid. The cell wall of animal is absent. Animal by extension has no cell wall. The cell membrane of plant cell is absent. It has no flexible cell membrane. Animal cell has cell membrane and it is flexible. The vacuoles. Now, what is the basic difference between the vacuoles of plant cell and that of animal cell? The vacuoles of plant cells is very large, while that of animal cell is small. Take note. The vacuoles of plant cell is very large, while that of animal is small. Lipid. Lipid is generally known as fat and oil. How is lipid stored in plants and how is lipid stored in animal as well? Lipid is stored as oil in plants, while it is stored as fat in animal. Lipid is stored as oil in plants, while it is stored as fat in animal. Nucleus. Now let's take a look at the nucleus. Where is the positioning of the nucleus in plant cell as well as animal cell? The nucleus is positioned at the edge of the cytoplasm in plant cell. The nucleus is positioned at the edge of the cytoplasm in plant cell. While in animal cell, it is positioned at the center. The nucleus is positioned at the center in animal cell, while in plant cell it is positioned at the edge. Now let's look at centrosome. It has no centrosome. It has centrosome. It has no centros. It has centros. Now centrosome and centros work for cell division. They are very, very important for cell division, for DNA and every other thing that has to do with hereditary and transmission of trait. So they are very, very important. Now one thing I also quickly want to include is what we call carbohydrate. Carbohydrate. Now how does plant store carbohydrate? Carbohydrate is stored in plants in form of starch. Carbohydrate is stored in plants in form of starch, while it is stored in animal in form of glycogen. Never forget. So can we just take it for the last time? Plant cell has chloroplast. Animal cell does not have chloroplast. Are you here with me? Now when we look at the shape, plant cell has a fixed shape or a definite shape. Animal cell does not have a fixed shape. Plant cell does not have cell membrane. Does not have a flexible cell membrane. Animal cell has flexible cell membrane. Plant cell plant cell have large vacuoles. Animal cell has small vacuoles. Lipid is stored as oil in plants, while it is stored as fat in animal. Carbohydrate is stored as starch in plants, while it is stored as glycogen in animal. Centrioles and centrosomes are absent in plant cell, while they are present in animal cell. And for the nucleus, it is positioned at the edge of the cytoplasm in plant cell, while it is positioned at the center in animal cell. Now, it's been a wonderful time out with you. I must confess. As usual, some questions will pop up on your screen, and try as much as possible to attempt it. And should you be having any constraints, just go through the video over and over again. It's been a nice time out with you. Thank you.